Okay, today we have State Senator Josh McLauren from, I think you're from Forsyth County, or not Forsyth, you're from Fulton County,
Yeah, I
State District
represent
14.
Fulton. I grew up in
Yeah.
Cobb County, but yeah, my district's in Fulton County.
Well, it's nice for you to come by today and do our little recording for us. Hope the day's going well for you. I'm pretty sure you're a busy guy right now.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
So no problem. So let's see, where can we start? Let's talk a little bit just about where we always start, I think, with any interview, a little bit about yourself. Tell us about who you are, where you're from, family, anything that you think's relevant for voters to know. The
Sure.
floor is yours. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm Josh McLaurin, and I have been in the state legislature 7 years. I was in the state house for 4 years, and then in the state senate for 3 years after that, and that's where I currently serve. The district in the state senate district in North Fulton County, where I serve, is from the northern part of Atlanta all the way up to Alpharetta, and so I actually have the northernmost Democratic state senate territory in the entire state. It's the
Right.
suburbs, around. You hear about the elusive Kemp Warnock voter, right? The kind of the
Right.
swing voters that decide our statewide elections. Those are the voters I've been talking to for the last 10 years in the suburbs
Yep.
where you've seen those major shifts. And that 2024 map, the blue arrows that showed up, even though
Mhm.
nationwide, Trump had a wave of, some size, but in Metro Atlanta, we've been growing our gains. And so that's the kind of district I represent, is those blue arrows. I'm from Cobb County originally. I commuted to go to school, but I was in the Lassiter School District up in Cobb County, born at Northside Hospital, went to University of Georgia for undergrad, and went to Yale Law School for my law degree. Some folks know I was roommates with J.D. Vance for a year while I was at Yale, so that was kind of a trippy experience to say the least.
I bet.
I'm happy to answer questions about that, but no, it's normally just kind of a not so fun fact, But
Right.
obviously, he and I see things a lot differently. Um, but yeah, so came back to Atlanta, started practicing law. When Trump won in 2016, I sort of started to follow that adage of, if you want to see change, don't just complain about it, go do something. And I thought maybe I could run for office and bring some, sort of lawyer skills and a little bit of resources to try to make a little bit of a difference in the suburbs where I grew up. So even though I grew up in Cobb, I remember driving through my district a lot as a kid, or my dad would drive me on the way to school. And so I'm well familiar with the area and gave it a shot. And I flipped my first seat in 2018 by 3 points. It was one of the 14 flips in the state house that we had statewide in 2018. And I was one of the northernmost house districts that did that, North Fulton. But, the things I focused on mostly, I've focused on a lot of legal issues, being an attorney in the state
Mhm.
legislature. I sat on the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee, which is a fancy way of saying criminal, and dealt with a bunch of bills relating to, the Republicans on law and order. All they want to do is increase crimes and penalties and throw people away forever in our failing prison system. And so I took a keen interest early on in trying to think of more progressive and healing ways that we can deal with public safety issues, and to not stick our head in the sand and pretend that gang violence is something that you can just pass a bill and fix. A lot of that's planned from inside the prisons. And so I took a real interest in prison advocacy, got to know a lot of the families and people fighting for parole reform. And so my view is that that's one of the major areas where we could save taxpayer money by not imprisoning people that, are nonviolent, could be out raising a family, working, contributing to society. And that fits with the overall platform that Democrats have had at the state legislature of expanding Medicaid, of, common sense gun regulation, investing in public schools. I think Democrats we need to be able to tell stories about the way that everyday people, working people, are fighting to thrive. Fighting just to survive, but the ways in which state policy could help them thrive. That is what principally we need from our Democrats running for statewide office. So you can see kind of my background fed into the way I did legislative advocacy. That's how I fit into the larger team picture for Democrats. And I think I have a reputation at the Capitol for being very outspoken, for fighting against all the Republican BS very vocally and hopefully skillfully, and raising the profile of our platform and our perspective so that the media picks it up and we're able to punch back in this media environment.
Great. That's a great introduction. Thank you for that. And talk about telling stories. I think that is very important. And I think that the way you lay that out is a very good story to tell to voters about, where your background is, where you're coming from. And now, sort of stepping a little bit further, why are you running specifically for lieutenant
Well, I actually love this question because I think I got a good answer to it. So, the governor's got a lot of power, right? And
governor?
everybody wants to be governor. And some people
Right,
will say lieutenant governor's got governor in the title, and it's all about the governor. I have really had my most fun at the state capitol, what we just talked about, telling stories and
right.
going to the well, giving speeches. My caucus, both House and Senate, there's often the question, hey, the media is here today to talk about this bill. Who should we send? To go talk about the bill and give the Democratic perspective. And I'm honored. I just got the endorsement of my Senate Minority Leader Harold Jones out in Augusta, and he one of the things he said when he introduced me in Richmond County is when we got a tough fight, we got a tough bill, go get Josh, right? If there's a big issue and we need the media presence, like go get him. He can handle it for us. And I'm honored by that. But what I think that means is that I'm in a good position to be sort of like on a football team, the wide receiver. Not everybody can be quarterback, right? And you'll have a governor who makes budgetary decisions, veto decisions, decisions about which bills to try to move through the legislature. And I feel fully competent to do that job. But I think where my real value add is on the Democratic team is this messaging role to be able to go on. So a couple months this year while campaigning, I went on Newsmax, News Nation, Fox, some
Wow.
conservative channels, and I went on
Yeah.
voluntarily. And one of the things the booker told me, the book's the talent is we rarely get Democrats who want to be on these shows because they either are afraid of it or they think that they're better than being on those shows or whatever. But so he was like, I'll get you as many appearances as you want because basically these shows don't often see Democrats who are willing to come fight in these spaces.
Right.
So that's me. I want to go fight in those spaces. And the lieutenant governor role, even if they change the Senate rules to make that role less powerful, which I think some insiders would expect that the Republicans will do if they're still in the majority, it's still a bully pulpit. You want somebody in the lieutenant governor role, statewide role, to be able to go on TV, go to the news media, and say, "Here's the Democratic perspective. Here are the exact working people that with names and specific jobs and small businesses who are affected by these awful Republican pieces of legislation." And be able to amplify their voices in a way where we can shape public opinion and build political will for whatever it is the Democratic governor wants to do for all of the causes that we're working on, including flipping the House and the Senate eventually, so that we have a Democratic majority. We can start moving offensive legislation. But what I tell people often is it's not just about the policy. It's not just about candidates saying, "Here's where I am on these policies." If you don't have the public opinion and political will behind you to explain what's going on and why we need those policies, you're not going to be able to muster the coalition that you need. So I'm running as a storyteller, and I think I'm a perfect fit for a role that is principally a support role for a team, because that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years.
Okay. And you talked about a little bit about the role of lieutenant governor. I think there are some misperception among people. They think a lieutenant governor is being like the vice president of the state. And I guess in some ways it is. It's the secession works that way. But can you explain a little bit about, you talked about how the role may change if a
Mhm.
Democrat wins and a Republican. How does lieutenant governor, what does it do exactly, and that sort of thing? How can you explain what it does relative to, say, the vice president of the United States? How is it
Yeah.
different? How is it similar? So that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll be happy to break that down. So there's only two things really that the Georgia Constitution says about the role of lieutenant governor, right? The first is that if the governor has to vacate the position for any reason, obviously the lieutenant governor would step up and finish that term, right? So that's why I say I know I'd be fully competent to serve in the role of governor if that's what it came to. But the second thing is that the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate. So
Right.
that's kind of similar to the vice president at the federal level, although at the federal level, the vice president gets a tiebreaker vote, and that's not true for the Georgia lieutenant
Okay.
governor.
Yeah.
So you do preside, you have a gavel, and you stand up there every day, and you
And
recognize guests. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I'm sorry, dear. It's a little more actual functional. Like the vice president tends to be more ceremonial in that
Right.
role, but lieutenant governor is okay. So it's more
Right.
functional in that role. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the lieutenant governor historically, so the position wasn't even created at the beginning of the state. It was a newer position in the 1940s, which is when the,
Hmm.
the Constitution was amended to add the lieutenant governor role. And we elect the lieutenant governor separately from the
Right.
governor, right? Some states, it's appointed by the governor, you run on a ticket, whatever. And not every state has a lieutenant governor, but we do. separately elected, and they're president of the Senate. So the goal, I think, in the 1940s was to give the lieutenant governor a lot of power over what happens in the Senate. And right now that's true. Burt Jones, the outgoing lieutenant governor who is running for governor as a Republican, he enjoys a great deal of power within the chamber to decide who the committee chair people are. He gives those to his friends, right? He also moves legislation. He has priority bills that he wants to see move, and he decides whether any bill can or can't move within the Senate. And that he has taken some wacky positions that have even put him at odds with the House Republicans, right? So he has done a lot with that role in terms of using its formal power. Now, his power comes from the Senate rules, which every 2 years after each election, both the House and the Senate adopt their own chamber rules, right, to govern their own
Right.
activity for the biennium. So the Senate rules are what give Burt so much power because under those rules, he can assign all these different things. Now, if there's still a Republican majority and a Democrat gets elected to the LG role, the expectation is that the Republicans will try to pass a rules package that takes all those formal powers away and basically just sticks you up there with a gavel. And so
Right.
I'm trying to, like, I want to be honest in the way I campaign. Absolutely, if I could move bills through the Senate, I would, and I would address all our priorities. But I want to be honest to people. Even if the rules get stripped, I want to make the case for why I would be a good messenger in that role anyway. And I think there's really three things that lieutenant governor can do, even if they strip the Senate rules of all that power. The first thing is what I just said, the bully pulpit, the messaging role. Well, it's messaging, maneuvering, and fundraising. So the messaging piece is the bully pulpit. The maneuvering piece is you still have that gavel. And you can make rulings. You can call on people the way you want. You can make rulings against or for certain motions. And if they want to overturn you, they got to get all their members out of the bathroom and away from vacation so they can come get their numbers and vote to overturn you, right? So you can really throw some sand in the gears if you are a chairperson of the Senate who is at odds with what the majority is trying to do. And if these guys are going to pass abusive legislation that bullies people, that takes basic rights away, it shouldn't be easy. They should have to go through some real stress. I mean, our chair, Charlie Bailey, often talks about making Republicans crawl over broken glass to get their wins. And I share a similar view that we want to make it hard on them, not just a cakewalk to go do all the bad things they want to do. So then the
Right.
third thing, besides the procedural and the messaging stuff, is fundraising. Once Georgia Democrats get a couple footholds, like flipping governor, lieutenant governor, maybe attorney general, and so on, national Democrats and particularly donors will start to notice, hey, it's not just a couple U.S. Senate seats in Georgia. We are now starting to flip the state apparatus. And that is such critical attention for our state House caucus and our state Senate caucus who are working on a path toward a majority. We need to get the entire country excited about flipping the state House and the state Senate. And so if you've got the kind of the dam breaking and these first couple statewide offices start to flip, then that is the excitement building that we need to start flipping the majorities as well. So I see it as a very active role. I know people will ask me, well, what if they strip the rules? Aren't you going to be sad if that happens? I said, no, there's a lot to do with that role, regardless of what Republicans may or may not do. And it all comes back to being excited about the 5 to 10 year plan and being able to tell effective messaging stories to recruit a whole bunch of stakeholders for that plan.
Okay, great. Do you have, as lieutenant governor, or yeah, I know you've had your issues that you pushed as state senator. Do you have issues in particular that you'd like to focus on while you are lieutenant governor? One or two issues in particular that are bigger, that are really at the top of the list for you?
Well,
Healthcare
right.
or anything like that?
I think right now the open wound in Georgia policy is healthcare. And this is a national issue, but it is absolutely going to be a critical state level issue for 2026 and beyond. There's a confluence of two things that are happening right now that are devastating healthcare in Georgia and elsewhere. One is the big, whatever budget bill, however you want to call it, that put
I've
new
got a name for it.
yeah,
I
we've been
won't say
coming
it.
up with some creative adjectives for that, right?
Right,
But it's a billionaire bill, right? I mean, it
right.
is designed to dismantle our safety nets and to make the people who are worse off already even worse off. So new restrictions on Medicaid, cuts to the Medicaid program. So that those cuts to Medicaid, combined with the failure to extend the Obamacare subsidies that have been a lifeline for millions of people to afford the premiums on the exchanges. The combination of those two things, we are expecting 500,000 additional Georgians to lose healthcare, Georgians who have it now. but in the next few years to lose 500,000 more people from the rolls. Now, keep in mind, out of 11 million people, Georgia's already got 1.3 million people who are uninsured, an extremely high uninsured rate. So we're talking about nearly 2 million Georgians that if the status quo is maintained based on current Republican decision making, 2 million Georgians will not be insured in a few years' time. That's devastating because, again, people like to think, sometimes that, oh, well, that's their problem. That's not my problem. No, we are all in one risk pool. If 2 million Georgians show up at an ER uninsured and get expensive care, that affects everybody's costs. And so the closure of rural hospitals is a huge piece of it. But it's also the current hospitals that will stay open. Those hospitals still are going to pass along costs to people who are able to pay. So that healthcare crisis truly is an example of what affects the least of us affects all of us, right? And we've got the state, is sitting on several, 10, $15 billion worth of unrestricted surplus funds. Brian Kemp's saying, well, we can't fund SNAP, we can't fund healthcare subsidies. Well, what are we going to do then about this crisis? So we need to have state level officials who are willing to close the gap when the federal government is going through all this chaos. And that's the type of leadership I think everybody wants. So healthcare is the biggest issue. Now, I've got issues I've worked on personally, aside from the caucus, that I'm kind of excited about. They may be small, it seems like small issues to some people, but I think it reflects what people are really asking for. So in the Atlanta area, car booting is an incredibly predatory industry. And I saw somebody get booted last night when I was going out to eat. $75 or else you're held hostage, right? And they may boot you for unlawful reasons. So I've worked on reform. I got the first ever statewide booting legislation passed in the state of Georgia by working with Republicans to give some basic accountability to an industry that's run wild. The other thing I'm really proud of is I got the first ever $1 million in the state budget, first money ever for breakthrough therapies for veterans who have post-traumatic stress. So it's research into psychedelics and other type breakthrough medicines that have been shown not just to treat PTSD in the short run, but maybe even cure it. I mean, some of these studies that are coming out are absolutely incredible. And if you talk to veterans, I've got some ex-special forces and veterans in my district, they need this. They really, really want breakthrough therapy research so that they can address traumatic brain injuries, PTS, in a really effective way. And so again, there's red states all over the country that are investing in this. Kentucky has invested tens of millions of dollars in one of these. Texas is putting $50 million and more in this type of research. And so I was proud to help lead the charge in Georgia because when it comes to veterans, it's easy to say thanks for your service. But when you really put your money where your mouth is, you've got to go look at the research and the treatments that they are talking about as being effective for post-traumatic stress. So I've been leading on that as well.
Okay, thanks. Moving on a little bit. Now, right as we do this video, there are only two of you in the Democratic side on Lieutenant Governor. I know both of you. You probably know each other. But so this is not meant as an adversarial question. It's more meant as how am I? Just how does my experience work in my favor? What sets you apart from your current opponent, or maybe any other opponent as far
Sure.
as the
Well,
Lieutenant Governor?
I'll start with the fact that I will probably be the only state legislator in this race, House or Senate. And I've served in both chambers. I have the established relationships, hundreds of relationships in the state legislature. I just told you about a couple big policy wins I had even this year. Those don't happen without Republican relationships and Democratic, because you got to get your own caucus on board with you, and you've got to work across the aisle with Republican leadership and rank and file members to get things done. And I think as much as we want Democrats who fight, and I am certainly a fighter and I'm known for that, you've got to be able to balance it. You've also got to be able to have those relationships, work across the aisle, and get things done. Voters want both, and I think I can deliver both. So I start with the fact that I've got the experience within the chamber. And I mean, if I win Lieutenant Governor, it's a matter of switching seats in the chamber about 20, 30 feet. Right. So I know the room very, very well, and I know the players in the game. But what I'll also say is I'm not like an establishment guy. I mean, the 8 years I've served have gone by really fast. I am one of these guys who didn't have any plan to run for office, and then all of a sudden I found myself with a slight bout of Trump derangement syndrome, right, in 2016. So I thought, I got to get involved, I got to help out. So I still feel like one of those people who was not trying to make a career out of this, but is somebody who really urgently wanted to address the moment that we're living in and step up with that fresh energy of somebody who really wants to change the environment and not just become some kind of capital gadfly, right? So I would resist any characterization that I'm some, 50-year Capitol guy who all I care about is staying in the building. This is one of the reasons I'm not staying in the state Senate, because I don't want to dawdle or sit around in the same place too long. I want to keep this energy going. I want to keep this fight moving. And so I think I bring the right mix of experience where I've actually done a lot and spent years in the building with the kind of fresh energy of still fighting, still resisting in the Trump era to hold powerful people accountable and to speak the truth out loud about their abuses and overreach. And I don't think any other candidate's going to have that combination.
Okay, great. Thank you. Move away from issues a little bit. Let's talk about political strategy, because a lot of Democrats in primaries want to know how are you going to win?
Yeah.
What's your strategy? Now, and I realize you can't give away the farm. You have your own little, maybe secret stuff you don't want to share, but just in general, what's your strategy for winning the primary and then moving on from the primary onto the general? What do you see as the way to do that?
Sure, I'll talk about both. So the
Okay.
primary, I think, conversations like these, I've traveled all over the state and talked to Democratic county parties everywhere. I was up in Floyd County in Rome, Georgia for their annual
Mhm.
event. I've been all the way down. I'm going to Skidaway Dems tomorrow at the complete other end of the state, right by
Okay.
Savannah on the
Yeah.
coast. I've been to the Tift County Dems and talked to the chairman there about how, 8 years ago, there's maybe 3 people that show up to the meetings, and now there's 15 to 20, and it grows every day. I have been at the front lines of the emerging Democratic power and presence in this state for the last, 10 years, basically. And I know we've been in the wilderness for about 20, but I have seen these changes in real time because I've been present. I've been around Democratic circles, not just in Metro Atlanta, but statewide. I went out with a couple colleagues to Sparta to talk to the families, the black farmers affected by the tar buttons who want to expand the railroad and quarries down there. And, working people everywhere, not just in Metro Atlanta, need fighters and need storytellers who can go out and travel these places and do that. So in the primary, it's about building trust. It's about making sure that everybody in the state knows the type of fighting I've done in the state house, the type of speaking up I've done, that I can do that for more than just my district, that I can do that truly statewide and incorporate all these stories from around the state to develop a real sense of shared identity and shared purpose so that we can get excited together as a Democratic Party about the type of governance project that we want to engage in. So getting that name ID out there, making sure that people know the kind of work I've been doing, that's the primary strategy. And I put 10,000 miles on my car in about 4 months in the last 6 months of campaigning. So I've been working really hard to get everywhere and show that I'm somebody who shows up. Now, for the general, I will be a little more, I'll talk about the data, right?
All right.
My win number in my district is over 40,000. That's how many votes I get in a contested election to win. I believe I got 72,000 votes in this latest election in 2024 because I was unopposed. And that's not just any votes. Those votes in the North Fulton area are, and I mentioned this at the top of our call, those are the suburbs that are
Right.
changing the direction of Georgia. If you look at, again, those blue arrows on the New York Times map of 2024, and you got to give Stacey Abrams and all the organizers who've been working over the last few years a lot of credit, but Georgia has been built different. We have been unique in the sense that we've been able to convert some of these moderate Republican votes into real Democratic statewide votes on a number of occasions, and 2020 is really proof of that. But my power base, where I come from politically, the state house district I won, the state senate district I won, these were frontline districts in exactly that suburban territory where we are determining the direction of Georgia. And that, we've talked about Kemp Warnock voters, right?
All right.
They live in my district, and I believe I have the trust of a lot of Kemp Warnock voters who have seen me in action. They've seen me as a reasonable attorney who is not just a firebrand. If I speak up, if I'm convicted about something, I don't do it at the expense of my relationships and my kindness to my fellow man, in and outside of the Capitol building. So I think I've got trust with exactly the voters we need to win statewide in a general election. I think I've got appeal in that type of area as well. So, that's the kind of candidate we want, is somebody who has a head start on gaining the trust of those critical voters that we need to turn out.
Okay. Great answer. Uh, I think we've gone over most of the stuff here that I've got on the list. I think, and you've given some very in-depth, great answers. I appreciate that. So I know you're busy. We're going to wrap this up. I try to keep these interviews about 30 minutes long.
Sure, sure.
So give me, I guess your closing stump speech for a minute or two about why Josh McLaurin needs to be the next lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia.
Happy to.
Or,
I think when you walk in a room of Democrats, 80% of people agree about 80% of the
right,
policies that we need to work on. So we're at an interesting moment in history. It used to be as a candidate, you would say, here's my exact position on all these policies. And that critical work of, okay, are you with me or against me on my policies was the main focus. I
right.
think the main crisis we're in now is a media and a messaging crisis. The reason that Democrats are losing is not because our policies are bad. Our policies are awesome. And if you poll them individually, we get 70% plus support on all of them. Expand
Hmm.
Medicaid, reverse the 6-week abortion ban, invest more in working families, you know, and take on billionaires and oligarchs. I mean, that stuff is our bread and butter. We're very good at talking about it to ourselves, but we have a really hard time letting the public know, hey, these state Republicans you keep electing over and over again, they're not with you. They are passing legislation that you find harmful, that you are, if you get polled on it, you say you don't support it. But when election season comes, these Republicans keep getting elected. Now, I think a lot of that's gerrymandering, but we
Hmm.
have a messaging crisis. When I see John Ossoff in a room defending his record, I don't see people criticizing his policy decisions very often. I see people asking him, when are Democrats going to fight at the U.S. Senate level? Are you going to get better leadership that can message better to the public and be fighters, right? So my pitch to voters in the Democratic primary in 2026 is that I am that fighter. I am the guy who knows how to tell these stories, to take the fight to Republicans in a general election, and to be strong, to stand up, to not apologize for our values, to be convicted, to defend vulnerable groups, to articulate the case for why all of the policies we support are critical and why Republicans are failing on all of these counts. I think I can do that better than any candidate that could get in the race, and I think that's what I've been doing for 7 years. And I'm proud to have that track record to show to primary voters who are considering the field this season. So again, you know, I'm putting myself forward for this role. It's actually a little bit uncomfortable for me because I'm not used to throwing elbows in a contested primary and saying,
Right.
"No, I've got to be the guy." But I truly believe that I'm the guy for this role. That I've picked a seat that really matches my talents, and I want to be able to keep doing what I've been doing just on a statewide scale.
All right. That sounds great. Josh, thank you so much. I appreciate anybody who steps out and runs for any office, but especially statewide office. Georgia is a very hard state to run in. 159 counties, big state, and it takes a lot of energy, a lot of just drive to do that. And for anybody who does that, I appreciate it, especially for you being a state senator, being articulate. I think you are a great voice in the future of our party. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for the interview and hope to see, I will be inviting you up this way, especially after the new year when we have some events, but I hope to see you in person then.
We would love to get up to date and anywhere where I'm invited. And thanks for the kind words, Tom. I'm glad that we are bringing some good energy to 2026.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.